In light of the Raj Kundra pornography scandal, it would be so tempting to say something is rotten in the dream factory of India, that is Bollywood. But if you speak to Bollywood insiders, they will say something is rotten in how the outside world, especially the politicians and the media, descend on Bollywood to hang them up dry. Because frankly, everyone profits from such an association and accusation. Moral corruptors or bleating scapegoats. The last word can never be said about Bollywood and its association with politics and politicians. But to make sense of it all, especially in cases where truth is a casualty and a liability, I have on my show today one of the most eminent film historians in the country, Gautam Chintamani. Gautam inherits a rich literary tradition, both sides of his family. He is the best-selling author of books like Rajniti, The Loneliness of Being Rajesh Khanna, and the film that revived Hindi cinema. So, welcome to the show, Gautam.
Thanks, Juggi. It's great to be here. And, the whole CAA spin that you have given, I've always been intrigued by that. So, very happy to be here. And, it's wonderful to have this chat on a topic which is going to touch all of us in more ways than, we would imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's start. I will lead on to a lot of issues because there are so many things which are connected with Bollywood. But let's start with the current issue, which is like dogging Bollywood is the Raj Kundra scandal. And as to quote Shah Rukh Khan's famous line, "Abhi picture baki hai mere dost." So what is it that we are not seeing in this entire scandal come out? It seems to me it's like, it's a game of mirrors. There is something which we are saying, and it's a crime case, absolutely. And the police have to pursue the crime to whatever end it leads to. But there is something which we are missing in this big picture. Would you like to talk about that?
So the issue which has come at hand is, for all of us to see. There is no smoke without fire, and there is no fire without smoke. So what we are seeing is probably what is being allowed to come out, and there could be a lot more to that. But one thing remains a fact that the glamour industry and the entertainment industry is a place which attracts all sorts of people. So there is a high possibility of exploitation. And this is not something which has just happened in the recent past, or it's a phenomenon which is, the post-internet boom phenomenon, or say the post-liberalization phenomenon. It's always been there, right from the time of the early days of cinema till today. All industries in the world, irrespective of which country, which language, there is a sense of exploitation in the business. And it is true for all businesses. The problem arises that when you start making money from somebody else's misery, and you end up being hailed as an artist, for the want of any other word, or you are somebody who's giving it as is or showing the mirror to society, what happens is that within these terms, somewhere between these two bookends, we start losing the perspective of how to see things. Is exploitation bad? Of course it is bad. But then how can we justify that? But then you would say that one man's meat is another man's poison. So in sab cheezon ke beech mein kya hota hai that we end up forgetting the bigger picture. The details which are emerging from the Raj Kundra case, and the matter is still being investigated. And yes, picture abhi baki hai, mere dost. And but one thing is very clear, that on the face of it, the apps and the content which was being put on these apps, and how the whole MO of this operation, if I can use that word, is very prevalent in the industry. If you have heard people or read stories, and it's not something new. My big worry is that if you look at the history of cinema, it is very interesting that a lot of people think that it is our society which reflects the cinema. There are a lot of interviews with filmmakers and authors and actors will tell you, हम सिर्फ शीशा दिखाते हैं और जो हो रहा है वो हम करते हैं. I don't believe that completely. See, after the Russian Revolution, when the Bolsheviks took over, and cinema was a relatively new medium at that time, and the whole setup of this October Revolution was that the bourgeois don't know they are exploiting people, and on the wake of if you follow the French Revolution, then all these things came to a point where you said that the common man needs to be heard, and we are the voice of the common man.
Correct.
But what Lenin understood at that time, and this is documented history, this is not my opinion, he understood the power of cinema because it could connect to the lowest of the person who didn't have any access to your art galleries and your great literature and the saloon talks and that kind of stuff. So what he did was that he set up a film commissionerate with the sole purpose of disseminating information, namely Karl Marx's Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto, how to break it down in a way which would be readily acceptable and understandable by the common person on the street.
So let me interrupt you here, Gautam. Therefore, you are saying that the purpose of cinema from the time of Lenin, I think you're referring to Battleship Tomikin, and right from that time onwards, the purpose of cinema has been didactic, with an intent to teach, to instruct.
No, not completely. Yeah, on the face of it, that is one way of looking at it. But what I'm saying is that if cinema had that intrinsic power, that inherent power to convey information, and people like Sergei Eisenstein, who made Battleship Potemkin and so on and so forth, if they could make something which has, so if you look at Battleship Potemkin, it's the 1920s, and if you look at a film like Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, which is the late 1980s, he has taken the entire Odessa staircase sequence and transported that to a railway station in New York, and it still holds. What it is trying to tell you is that this basic tool is still effective even after 8 decades. So the information that you're giving therein does have that the medium has the capacity to inculcate a way of thinking. Now, who gives the information? What information is being given? So what has also happened somewhere, which brings us to the whole 90s, especially popular Hindi films in the 90s and popular Tamil or Telugu films of the 1990s, where words like sexy entered the lexicon. If you remember that song, Sexy, Sexy, which is Log Bole, or Choli Ke Piche. Now, when young children with impressionable minds, it's a catchy tune. So if young children start saying sexy, 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 they don't know what it entails. And for them, this is the new normal. Like today, you and I can be surprised at the cell phone technology. I mean, I'm still surprised at how fax works. You press a button and things go there. But children born today, it's all natural for them. So for them, that information is absolutely fine. So what has happened from the 1970s onwards, and I'm very, I'll use the word, consciously here, because I don't have a better term, to change a way of thinking at things. Like, for example, if you take...
We'll talk about that because you're on a very interesting ground, and I'm going to of course refer to the changing morality, the changing taste of not only the viewer but even that of the filmmaker, and to a certain extent we are all becoming voyeuristic in the process to a certain extent. But there's something very interesting which you mentioned in the beginning when you are expanding your theme, where you said that there is a certain level of exploitation. And I find that extremely ironic that we've all heard of the famous or the infamous casting couch and other kinds of exploitation which happen in Bollywood. And yet the interesting thing is, in an ironic way, B-town, B actors especially, are exploited not only by the politicians, but by the media also, for almost like for kind of a cannon fodder kind of news, of a coverage. The Sushant Singh case, for instance, is a classic example where we just go on, and the Raj Kundra case, which fills up so much of airtime. It's like you get two sets of competing exploiters who are feeding on each other. Where do you think we are going with this?
So it's a business. At the end of the day, news is a business, and a business has a few agendas. Business needs to make money. Business needs to, conquer new ground. I think this everything, be it for the sake of argument, be it the politicians or be it IPL, be it uh, Bollywood, OTT, Tollywood, or anything out there which is on uh, 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 on a media platform, is always looking for new audiences. It needs new people. So look at two distinctive things and how I feel they work together. So in the 1980s, a filmmaker like Mani Ratnam broke new ground and made films for the young people of that time. So Mr. Ratnam was in his 20s at that time, and that was the kind of films that he was making. So if you look at, say, a Mauna Ragam, which is that a woman is in love with somebody and her lover dies, and then she marries somebody else and she can never come to accept that. It struck a chord with a lot of people. Now, every decade, what Mani Ratnam does is that he makes a film for young people. Now, he seems to be looking for younger audience with each decade because there's a new wave of audience coming in.
Yeah.
What happens to the audience which is, aging with him? The same aspect for IPL, people the flashy Kabaddi league or all that. And of course, it promotes sports to a very great extent because, to make it to 11 players playing for India, be it in hockey or Kabaddi or cricket, kills a lot of careers. So if IPL gives them an opportunity to make a living by, honing their skills, then why not? But that's one side of the argument. You're always looking for new audience. I remember that, we are completely missing the point because when Sridevi passed away, I remember being called to a couple of these TV debates, and I'm a huge Sridevi fan, and I thought that maybe we are
I'm also, by the way, I have to tell you, I think she was absolutely out
yeah,
of this
so
world.
I think the kind of contribution that she made to cinema, I thought we were going to talk about that.
Extremely talented actress, extremely talented. Yeah.
Exactly. But what happened in all the post-death discussion now, of course, she died untimely and in a way nobody had expected. And there is investigation into it, or that's a completely different array. But if you're looking at an artist, you can't be asking people to talk about Sridevi, but asking that, how do you think she died? Could you have drowned in the bathtub? What was the thing? What was the height of the bathtub? And I remember that after one such TV debate, I threw up, my hands. I said, I can't get into that.
We can't get
but that is, it's a chicken and egg situation. You are saying that the people like this, that's why we are doing this. But if people don't have choice, now they have a choice. That's why mainstream news is also losing a lot of ground because people have access to social media, alternative media, or they can get first person accounts from a lot of other places. So your hold is somewhere dying. I think that is what has happened.
That is what
across
no, I'll take you up on this point because this is a very significant thing which you're talking about. In short, two words: new audiences. And just to, I'm not trivializing it, but literally now if you have an app on your cell phone, during the time of the pandemic, one could searching the app for, let's say, oxygen cylinders. The same app today, there's another app on your cell phone, especially, let's say you have a migrant worker or you have somebody, let's say, who's doing a night journey or something, and he's looking for some entertainment, for want of a better word, some sleazy entertainment. And that is where the likes of Mr. Raj Kundra and company, come in and provide that entertainment. This is a new brand of audiences which are coming in. There are new segments, there are new pockets of audiences with different varying tastes who are coming in. So in the light of this, Gautam, what I really want to ask you is that, forget the cliche that we are the land of the Kama Sutra and all that. I don't want to get into all that. But the fact is, do we need to grow up and be more adult in our choices in terms of regulation? And why am I talking of regulation? Because like, for instance, like you have the telecom business. So at the end of the day, the telecom regulatory authority regulates a business. We need to regulate, and regulate doesn't mean policing, as you would agree with me, but do we need to regulate adult content, OTT, apps, pornography? Because at the end of the day, there is consumption. Whether we like it or not, India is the biggest consumer of pornography in the world. Now, these are realities when we can't escape from that. We can't go back into the 50s and say, let's go back into a time warp and we won't allow all this. where do you come into this, in the sense, what do you think about regulation? Because that to me is key today in what's going on, especially in the light of this Raj Kundra scandal.
I totally agree with you, Juggi, that regulation is the word, but more than that, the implementation needs to be checked. One of the biggest problems that India faced in a lot of things was that the last mile delivery would always be lacking. And it is true in this aspect also. You don't have to go back to the 1950s and say that, or be in a time warp. I disagree on that aspect, because in the 70s, independent financing entered Indian cinema. Largely in this context, when I use the word Indian cinema, term the Indian cinema, I mean Bombay cinema. Mm-hmm. So because of that, adult films like Chetna and a couple of other films that B.R. Ishara made at that time attracted significant audience and enjoyed box office success. In the 60s, the whole B industry was thriving. In the 50s also, it was there. By the 70s and 80s, it merged into the mainstream. So we have had this problem ever since, and there have been solutions given time and again. Like in the early 2000s, when the late great filmmaker Vijay Anand, Goldie Saab, became the censor board chief, he actually put forward a proposal saying that let's start with the X-rated certification, because his concern was,
okay, that's interesting.
Yes,
okay.
He was a very forward-looking man. So his concern at that time was that if you go for these morning shows in single-screen cinema halls in the back of Beyond or the Boondocks, what happens is that people start putting a couple or two reels of adult films which have nothing to do with the film which is being advertised.
That's right. So and it started in Kerala, if I'm not mistaken, these kind of things, It
was a pan-India thing happening. And it's a global phenomenon. So in Hollywood, this term is called inserts. So what would happen is that you would lure the audiences based on, say, a title which is, which tells you that you're in for some adult fare.
Sure.
But when you go inside, you were being given X-rated fare.
X-rated.
So this conundrum was what Goldie Saab said, that we can't stop it, but we can control it. If we start giving X-rated certification and we penalize people who don't take certification, what it will do is that somewhere it will put in this fear of the law, and it will also give them a reason to make it above board. See, the porn industry is a highly exploitive industry. There is a lot of trafficking involved. These are realities which a lot of people don't want to accept.
Absolutely.
The younger, the trafficking of young girls and boys across the world, especially in the Eastern European bloc and all that, this is the font which is feeding this. So you will have a demand, and to meet that demand, you cannot have mainstream acceptance. So you will have an increase in the supply. The demand has to be met.
Do you think that alternatively, that obviously, and I completely agree with you, that there has to be some kind of a censor board certification of maybe more adult content, or maybe from a cinema point of view, if you remember, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, this filmmaker called Sasi, if I'm not mistaken. He entered the fray, with bold themes. But they were not exactly pornographic themes, but there was a lot of, at that time, adult content. But again, they were passed by the censor board. So a time maybe has come where the censor board has to be now incorporated with more forward-looking, talented people from all creative walks of life. And we give a certain license, but beyond, not to the point where exploitation is legitimized. But certainly, things can be shown on the screen which need to be shown on the screen.
Sure. So that's one way of looking at it, but also the industry needs to take up some responsibility. So if the police is investigating something in this Raj Kundra case, and there seems to be, according to the media reports and whatever is coming out, there seems to be enough reason to investigate the gentleman.
Correct.
That means that this thing was going on for a little while. See, the industry also has a very big problem where it believes that it is cut off from the rest of the world. तो वो ये कहते हैं कि ये घर की बात है. So domestic violence, physical abuse, fights and scuffles. If it's a man involved, they say, it's the larger than life aura. Sure. If it's a woman involved, they don't want to talk about that. So there have been many instances where seemingly bad things, anti-social things which need to be called out, are not called out by the industry themselves. Not only that, they also try to curb it or hush it by saying ye ghar ki baat hai. And then on the other hand, they go around telling people that you're hanging us to dry. Where, people have to come to a midway. So yes, the censor board certification methodology needs to be updated. There is move towards updating the Cinematograph Act and making it more relevant. I remember a conversation that I was having with Prasoon Joshi at one of these lit fests. Yeah. And I remember asking Prasoon sir that, why are things not moving at a pace which will tell us that things are happening in this century and not some other time. Yeah. He said everything changes so fast. So by the time you put together something which is acceptable to everybody, something like the OTT explosion takes place and it changes everything. Correct. So yes, there needs to be some regulation because there is a great deal of exploitation which is being done, and parties that need to take responsibility are not doing their job. So suppose, even if you give an adult certificate to a film, cinema halls allow people to bring in children who are definitely not permitted to watch that. Because, India hai, ghar pe kaise chhode, tu janta hai main kaun hu, main 2 ticket le lunga, that kind of stuff. So the cinema hall fears that they may lose out on certain patronage, so they allow that. The audience knows that they can have their way. So if the thing is being beamed onto a phone, how is it that you're going to protect the child not accessing the phone? Children today are very adept at technology. They are smarter than many of us. They are smarter, yeah, absolutely. So somewhere parents, industry, and all stakeholders need to take charge also. And also, there is a system in place. It may not be effective, sure, but one needs to also make sure that the leakages are plugged before completely saying that, it's all gone to the dogs. Sure. And
I think the challenge is, these are the challenges which we have outlined, but also the digital space. I mean, the digital space is actually an area which actually needs even more, I will certainly not use the word monitoring, but it needs much more attention, in terms of the challenges, because you're right, everything is a click away or an app away, or it's literally, you can access anything at any point in time you want. Do you think there has to be a revamp? It's not only the censor board we are talking about, but a separate, maybe a kind of a digital authority which looks into these issues, which suggests practical solutions. Because at the end of the day, I still can't help get the feeling that, these are the Raj Kundra and all these cases are high profile cases, certainly crime cases, but they're not addressing the real problem. Pornography in India is a huge area. And unfortunately, we still haven't applied our minds to it, how to deal with it. So a digital kind of an authority.
I'm also like you. I'm a lot of people are trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. And one needs to be open to the idea. One needs to know for a fact that, hey, we don't know it all. This is a new ground. So yes, we should be open to the idea of trying to understand what is happening. But I still somewhere feel that, to resolve something, first we need to accept that. So yes, there is a lot of pornography in India, but we also need to accept that what is the problem with it? What is the impact it is having on the society?
Sure.
Also, as a consumer, what is it that you're consuming and knowingly or unknowingly empowering? So if I, as a consumer, apply a certain control that I am not going to promote exploitation. It's the whole thing like corruption. Corruption hai, ab hai. Are you pushing it or are you stopping it? Are you enabling it? How does the society take some responsibility? One thing about the whole Raj Kundra case, whatever comes out of it and the investigation which is going on, it makes me wonder that what was the need? what was the need for somebody like a Raj Kundra in this case to do what he's supposedly have done?
Yeah.
So that question also needs to be answered by a lot of us, that where do we stand as a society and what is it that we're doing? We're aping the West. Okay. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we say that the West does not have this kind of censorship. The West does not have that kind of certification. The West believes in being where they are. But look at how the society in the West is also undergoing some changes right now, where this kind of a free ride is being questioned. Patronage of people who are doing this kind of stuff is going down. People are being called out. So the problems of pornography also need to be highlighted, and the societal impact that they're having. I just want to know that, it's like the whole argument that do you know what you're consuming and what goes into making that? So I am also, I also have a desire to see that kind of a debate coming into place. See, regulation will come in some form or the other, and reprimand will come in some form or the other, or society's checks and balances.
Gautam, from this point, let's move to one more aspect of Bollywood, and I want to switch your attention to two totally different issues. And let's quickly mention this in passing, because this is again an important aspect. At the end of the day, there is, of course, this feeling, it's not a cliche, but a lot of people in Bollywood are soft targets. When you get nothing else, then you want to skip attention from either from governance or from management or whatever. Then people, it's like you get after Bollywood, you get, especially after B-town actors. This aspect is also becoming extremely common now in our society. Why do we, keep honing in on these people? And I'm not talking of the Raj Kundra particularly, because he will deserve what he has done. That's a totally separate issue. But the fact is, we saw that in the NCB case, we saw that in the drugs case. The Bollywood is the easiest fall guy you go after. Why, as a society, and it's not even the politicians. I think the media, if you ask me, is even more, we go after these guys as totally soft targets, spin any kind of stories, sometimes not even backed by authenticity or facts. The Sushant Singh Rajput case was a classic example, if you ask me. Why is this going on? I mean, how do you analyze this particular phenomenon?
See, if you're in the public view, then you are a moving target. I'm a little divided on this whole soft target business, because I feel that, no matter how you look at things, the machinery, the law and order machinery is not that off its rockers that it would just randomly go after somebody. Yes, you can say that the witch hunt may not be, may not commensurate the crime. That's one way of looking at it. But to say that it's a soft target, it's a little, it cuts both ways, because the kind of liberty that a lot of media personalities in India take for granted, and not just films, but any kind of celebrity in India takes for granted, often sees them doing things which need to be questioned to some extent. So if there is a lockdown in place and you break the rules and you have a party going on where you don't follow protocols, of course there is going to be a kind of a backlash. Now, does the media then drum it up because they don't have anything to sell? That's a completely different issue.
Sure.
But celebrities also tend to magnify things that happen to them.
No, fair point.
It's a human psyche.
But then why are we selective in going after certain people? If you ask me, Sunny Leone was a hardcore porn star, before she switched over and came into the mainstream. There is a lot of films of Balaji which actually tread the fine line between what is pornography and what is erotica. So I am saying, then why don't we have a standardized policy for each and every one in Bollywood?
So people, I think it's simply got to do with the fact that people who are reacting to this, or the media houses or what have you, They may have their own personal biases of looking at things. We all do that. I think we all start looking at things from our own personal bias, and then we color that. So, it's a very interesting study. My wife told me a few years ago, because I can be a little cuckoo at times. So she said that, do you know that the brain does not have the capacity to differentiate between a real experience and an imagined experience? So there can be a situation where, I may believe that I'm the aggrieved party. And, see, filmon ke baare mein main aapko ye bataun, Juggi, honestly speaking, I have worked in the industry, so there are a lot of people out there who love this line saying ki bhai meri kahani mein to main hi hero hoonga na. So that the show me, and like Fitzgerald said, that show me a hero and I'll write you a tragedy.
Right.
So I think somewhere it's a little ambiguous. It depends on how you want to see it, whether the glass is half full or half empty.
Absolutely. Okay, Gautam, let's switch from Bollywood, because we discussed enough of Bollywood. Let's go to our neighbor in Pakistan. There's something, I won't say interesting, something actually quite gruesome which is happening out there. This is that Noor Muqaddam case, if you have been following it. It's a very gruesome case, but, it makes me think that ultimately it is a reflection of a very feudal, of a very, hidebound kind of a society. There are reports coming that the girl who was murdered, her parents actually they have actually no really sympathy for their own daughter. And there are reports coming that this guy who killed Noor Muqaddam might actually get away with the entire thing. Money has been paid to practically everyone, the police officers. What does it tell you about a society, as we talk about our society, as we have become such big consumers of porn and Raj Kundra? What does it tell us about their society, that these things are in the open and not necessarily that person will face the rigors of the law? He might just get away scot-free with committing such a gruesome murder. What does it tell us about our societies?
So I haven't been following the case as closely, but it just brings to mind that how we've completely not understanding, as a man, I'm saying this, that we are not understanding the treatment of women, whether be it directly or indirectly, consciously or subconsciously. We see them as different. And I think that is where the problem starts originating. There have been many cases like that, even in our country, sure, where men have committed heinous crimes and gotten away with it seemingly with societal approval. So what it tells me is that, were we always like this? If not, then what went wrong? And I think as somebody who's studied cinema and culture and popular culture that much, I think to a great extent, films are responsible for shaping this kind of mindset. Because
for showing off, for shielding,
for creating, for approving this kind of an attitude. Because you normalize. I wrote a book on the film Pink, which featured Taapsee Pannu and Amitabh Bachchan, Kirti Kulhari, a few years ago. The reason I decided to write something on how the film got made and the impact it's had on people is that very few films come every now and then that manage to capture the zeitgeist totally, and also give a kind of a way forward for for people, and especially men in the audiences. And my wife, who's not a very big consumer of films, especially Hindi films, she was riveted when she saw this film. And it kind of made me think that if that film can find that kind of an audience, then it's probably tapped onto something. And I think somewhere the normalization of the abuse of women, or the male the male attitude and the approval that films give, that the societal approval that the narrative of the films give somewhere, it's really impacted the young in a very negative way. And I think what has also happened is that somewhere, you always feel that the problem is not at your doorstep. So a lot of parents, mothers, fathers who may have had sisters or who may have seen this kind of thing, they automatically start assuming that this is not going to happen to my offspring, and my offspring is not going to be somebody like this. So I think somewhere, and this also brings to mind how the Prime Minister in his speech, in his Independence Day speech, said that we need to teach the boys, we need to question them and we need to tell them more than anything else. I think that also, all these cases, all these instances are just telling us that, a lot of bad things have happened. And perhaps you need to question that you are also a part of it, somewhere promoting it or not doing enough to stop it. So I think this
you definitely are convinced about the fact that films do actually impact our psychological and our social mindsets to a certain extent, and they bring about certain changes in behavior.
Yeah, completely. Because look at things, certain things like the whole Karwa Chauth Vrat. It was there.
Sure.
But the way it was created and presented in Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, it completely changed how people looked at it.
Sure.
So these are small little instances, or say a line like, agar खूबसूरत लड़की को देख के छेड़ोगे नहीं, तो ये उसकी बेइज्जती होती है.
That's right.
And when somebody like Amitabh Bachchan or in Desh Premi, where he's chasing non-stop, or
and I don't know if you remember, Gautam, there used to be this movie called Jai Santoshi Ma, where the women were actually they were keeping ruts after that. It was so popular.
Inside the cinema. That's 1975. So you will be naive to think that is not there. Now, can it be used in a different way? Sure, yeah, because Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak was enamored by the power of cinema. And in the 30s and 20s, when he actually saw films, and he was a very close supporter and patron of Govindraj Phalke, Dada Saheb Phalke.
That's right.
And he believed that films, even Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore understood the power of films. And Tagore even directed a film which was Lost in a Fire, because they understood what this could do for the people. How it could push a sense of, say, nationalism or, standing up for what you believe in amongst the common folk. So that way, if you look at it from that perspective, or take the interest that the American agencies had in Hollywood. So Top Gun increased the people joining Navy.
The Navy, Air Force, and absolutely.
So we will be stupid to think that it does not have the power. Now, how you use it is a completely different thing. How you consume it is a completely different thing.
Enormous power of cinema. But Gautam, I cannot let you go away without talking about, I know one issue which is very, very dear to your heart. And I want to come off about your book, which you wrote about Rajesh Khanna. And this will be especially relevant for all our young viewers who, of course, they would know who Rajesh Khanna is, but probably not very familiar. But we all know he was called a phenomenon. He was, there were girls who were getting married to his photographs when at his prime. He enjoyed that kind of fame, which even today, many superstars, even Mr. Bachchan probably has said somewhere that he didn't enjoy the kind of fame which Mr. Rajesh Khanna did. But there's an aspect of him, and correct me if I'm wrong, which, and you rightly, I think you use the word dark star in reference to Rajesh Khanna. There is a certain darkness also, if I'm not mistaken, Gautam, he literally drank himself to death. He had obviously very troubled relationships. Finally, I think he had found some kind of peace in the last relationship which he had. What I find very intriguing, and talk us through this particular aspect, that here was a superstar, a classic tragic hero in the making in real life also. If you see his highs and lows, it's, and there used to be some bit of information which used to come out during the 70s and 80s about him, but not much was known today. If Rajesh Khanna had been there with us during these times, could he have escaped scrutiny? How is it that we don't know so much about him? We only know a little bit about Rajesh Khanna, but as I said, the highs, lows in his life have been tremendous. I can't think of any other actor who has been through these kind of, Ferris wheel kind of ups and downs. So talk us through that. How did he escape that kind of scrutiny? And now that people like you are writing about it.
So I think one of the reasons why not much was spoken about the behind the camera scenes of actors' life at that time was that the same thing, ये घर की बात है, इसको बाहर मत आने दो, and the image of the star. So you could control the media or the PR agencies strong enough to control what was going out or what was not going out. So if you look at instances like the entire story which got very widely reported in newspapers and magazines of Zeenat Aman being attacked by Sanjay Khan.
That's right.
Which injured
and
her.
Face was, she, in fact, her eye has never been the same after that.
Yeah, in more ways than one, it ended her career. So these kind of things, these things when they happen and they do not get reported the way they are, also tells you how controlled the narrative was.
Sure.
So Rajesh Khanna enjoyed his drink and maybe at times he went overboard. People who were with him would know that. But I think somewhere it is also his personality was always like that. He was not somebody who could be changed by the highs of highs or the lows of lows. He was what he was. I think his life is also a very the reason I use the word dark star there was that like a celestial body, he was so bright that the light could not shine on him. He could not look at what was happening around him. And by the time he came to that point where he wanted to be reflective, there was no light. And stars when they die, they become they just cease to be. So that was the analogy behind dark star, which was a play of words. But I think somewhere his life is also, his career is definitely a very important lesson for actors who followed that this is what happens if you are not present, if you're not aware of what you're doing. I remember a conversation I was having with Salim Khan of Salim Javed and Salman Khan's father.
Yeah.
And I was asking him that how come Rajesh Khanna never knew what was happening around him. He said stars have a tendency to be like that. They're completely disconnected from the world. And he used his own son Salman's example. And he said that Salman thinks this is not going to end. And I keep telling him that I have seen Dilip Kumar, I have seen Rajesh Khanna. So you are no different. You are not more unique than anybody else.
Sure.
So I think if Rajesh Khanna was around today, yes, there would have been a deeper scrutiny of his off-camera life, which is true for a lot of people. But also it is possible that the narrative could have been still controlled because we're seeing that a lot of things don't come out. Okay. So I think more than anything else, his presence tells you that you can have a good career without pushing the envelope beyond a point, because he was a popular male star. But if you look at some of his greatest hits, they are largely what the industry known as women-centric films. So if you look at Aradhna, or if you look at Kasam, Amar Prem, Kati Patang,
very important.
He never pushed the directors to change the script for him, which was very common with most actors of that time. He was always late, but then everybody was late. I mean, there's a popular joke that Shatrughan Sinha used to be so late that somebody said कि आप इतना late क्यों आते हैं, and Shatrughan Sinha, being the imitable Shatrughan Sinha, said that कि अरे late आते हैं, time पे आते हैं तो राम होते हैं, Shatrughan थोड़ा होते हैं. So in his case it got magnified. So the success got magnified, the failures got magnified.
Sure.
And his presence is the one which started this whole film journalism, the number one, number two game. So he changed the game, but by the time the game changed so much that he could not adapt to it. So it's not like his career ended in 73. He was one of the highest paid actors till 89, 90. And in a single year in 85, I think he had some 14 releases in a year. That's more than a film a month.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So he was extremely there, but that peak that he enjoyed,
that's right,
that could never be sustained, because for that it means that every film had to be a bigger hit. The audiences had to turn up more.
Sure.
And a lot of factors go into play. But yes, it's a fascinating life, it's a fascinating career.
Absolutely.
And it's a fascinating chapter in the history of Indian films.
And I today, despite all the media coverage and despite all the saturation and the carpet to carpet Bollywood coverage, we still don't have stars who give us that kind of material in terms of trying to understand, the lives which are like, which are larger than life kind of, lives.
Yeah, so
You have
you're
very
too
careful
close to
stars,
them. Yeah.
for want of a better word today.
Yeah, also, you're too close to them. There is no difference between the star anymore. I mean, like, if I read a Shah Rukh Khan tweet, it's as good as him talking directly to the star, to the audience.
Sure.
So the middle, the ground, which created the aura and created this larger than life aspect. I mean, if I see a star going to buy shoes, then I also do that, and it's not going to cut the same way as say Dilip Kumar or. I mean, in fact, Anil Kapoor told Shah Rukh Khan when Shah Rukh Khan started off and he started doing a lot of ads.
Right.
Anil Kapoor pointed out, no, keep a distance, be a star and don't do it, man. But Shah Rukh being Shah Rukh didn't do that, and he set a new template. So today, I think the access is much more. So in any case, and there are also non-film stars who are very big celebrities. Your YouTubers and your TikTok stars or anybody going
but that's
viral
a
for a
different
little
category.
while.
That's a different category altogether. But
the parameters are the same, na? कि उसके
yeah.
इतने followers थे, इतने likes थे, मेरे इतने followers थे, इतने likes. So somewhere it brings it down to a very base level.
But do you think this political correctness, for want of a better word, of the stars, whether they support the government of the day or the opposition or whatever, like a Tapsi Pannu, I mean, we all know her sympathies lie in a particular direction. That's absolutely fine. But they're all, and they're all politically correct in their tweets, in their humanitarian causes, in whatever their outreach. The sense of that's why I was talking about Rajesh Khanna. These are the last of the dying stars in a way of that generation, which actually had genuine, interesting stories. Today, the stories are the same, really. Everybody is so politically correct, athletically fit. They are all saying the right things. Nobody's saying the wrong things. And so that way, a particular generation has passed away. Do you think so?
In a way, yes, but then that's true across the board. So I think like one of the filmmakers that I worked with used to say that just because something is old and black and white doesn't mean that it's a classic.
Sure.
So what happened back then may not be that great, or just because you're technologically advanced today, you're creating great art. So I think somewhere, it's horses for courses. And also I think that the role model aspect has become a little more ingrained in public figures. So to that end, they take their presence a little more seriously.
That's right.
So, which is also a good thing, because, at the end of the day, you don't know how you'll end up inspiring or, motivating somebody. So I think it's to each to their own. And if we have that kind of access, a lot of the ambiguity goes away. And for some of us, the ambiguity was the star factor, and for some of us, it was something which was not needed. So I think it's the truth of the times that we live in.
Truth of the times. So Gautam, really, we can keep on chatting about these stories. These are never-ending, interesting stories. But but great. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. It's been absolutely wonderful. We know we have gone completely out of time, but hey, we had a good talk. That's what really matters, and I hope our viewers love this talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Juggi. I really had a wonderful time, and wish you and the channel a lot of luck and success.
Thank you so much, Gautam. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.